Let's talk also about your CEO from a mental
Yeah.
performance perspective that came in, because we have a lot of business people listening here and people that want to really have high mental performance, and doing the cognoscopy with a lot of entrepreneurs and working with groups like YPO and EO. Some of the numbers have not been where they need to be, and people need some type of actionable process. Yes, we can plug into the British and functional medicine process and diet and nutrition and lifestyle and exercise. But I do think there's a missing piece in the bioelectrical part. So let us know about the CEO and what you did.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a part of the Bhakti Brain Health Clinic, which is more kind of our omnivorous, where we do a lot of mental health, traumatic brain injury, peak performance. So we have our peak performance folks. So the one that we were talking about before we came on is a CEO. He is 45. Elite athlete, triathlons, Ironman, that kind of thing. Been doing those for years. Great physical condition. Has really handled most every segment of his life in terms of his health. Like many of these folks, he like here locally, we have the Mayo is the big medical system, and so he's in the Mayo executive program. So he had just come back from doing his annual executive checkup, where they use all the latest technology to check all the systems and all the blood work. And this is relevant in that as we were doing the process, so we did a QEG, right? So functional neuroimaging, we did ERP, so task-based functional neuroimaging. We do what's called a resonant frequency determination, which is like a QEG for the autonomic nervous system. So we look at the autonomics, central nervous system in a resting state, and then in an active state.
Maybe you can just
And
unpack those three, because I know my audience is not well versed at all. Dr. Drobot was probably the first bioelectrical medicine specialist that we had on. So I think just even a QEEG, we have had Andrew, he'll talk about neurofeedback, but I think it'll be important for people to understand those tests and what they're testing.
sure. So QEG, we do a 19 channel. So you've got a cap on your head with 19 sensors that are picking up the electrical activity of the brain at the scalp surface, and then uses all kinds of complex math. That's the Q in QEG. So EEG is electroencephalograph. The Q is quantitative. So when we take these measures of the electrical activity, and then we run it through three different artificial intelligence. Plus, the clinicians do a by eye analysis of the EEG. So we're looking at 19 channels of electrical activity separated into the different bandwidths, so delta, theta, alpha, beta 1, 2, 3, and gamma. So that's what we're seeing this electrical activity broken out to. And then we're just looking to see is how this brain is internally moving energy and information, neurotypical. And so we use Brodmann areas. So these are like maps on a location, or locations on a map, right? So the areas. So is Brodmann area 31 talking to Brodmann area 23 in the right way, right? So the right frequency at the right time. And so the analysis tells us that it's all this data is being compared to a normative database of peak performance brains. So it's how is this brain moving information through, say, the executive function network, and is it moving the information in a neurotypical way or not? And if not, specifically how? So we get very, very, very granular information that is what's called high in the temporal domain. So EEG is really good in a time series, but it's not great spatially, versus MRI, which looks at anatomy, is really good spatially, can tell you anatomically what's there, but it is very bad at telling you what's that doing, right? So our system, so functional neuroimaging is really about telling you what is that thing doing. You don't know the thing that you're looking at, but you know what it's doing in time. So we have very good temporal resolution to say, how is this area talking to that area? And then asking this question of, is that neurotypical?
Brilliant.
So that we do that resting state, eyes open, kind of see more of what's called the salience network. Then eyes closed, we see more of the default mode network, so two core networks for brain function. And then we do an ERP, or event related potential, where the person is doing a task. Usually there's symbols flashing on a screen. When they see a certain symbol, they click a mouse. And this is a test of executive function and attention, to say, can you follow the rule? So when this symbol appears, you have to recognize it. Oh, that's my symbol. What was my rule? Click the mouse. Did I click the mouse? Right. So we're looking at the brain executing that task, and we look at how does that brain do it. And we learn a lot of information about how well is that brain functioning when it has just even a minimal cognitive demand. How does it perform that demand? And then we're looking at the resonant frequency analysis, where we're tracking the autonomic nervous system. So there we're looking at a number of metrics like respiration rate, cardiac rate, HRV, skin conductance, temperature, kind of a spectral analysis of like the rhythm of the heart, but not the rhythm as in like my heart beats 60 beats per minute. We're not looking at that. We're looking at like how is the heart accomplishing its job of regulating, as part of the autonomic nervous system, and regulating the supply of nutrients and oxygen and all of that, right? So we have basically 10 channels of data coming from the body that we use to determine how is the autonomic nervous system functioning, and then all this data from the brain and central nervous system, and then we put all that together to tell a story about what's up with a person's system.
Okay, brilliant.
So,
And
so
then with the
yeah,
CEO, so you would have got some
yeah,
results, and then you would have done what to change
sure,
the numbers?
yeah. So with him, when we did the QEG, uh, we saw some garden variety dysregulation, and we just expect that in any brain that there's going to be dysregulation, and so we have our measures of anything that's less than 1.5 standard deviations away from the neurotypical is subclinical. It's novelty of how that brain figured out how to solve the world, right? Okay, no problem. But you start to get into 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 standard deviations, like that's a problem. It's a real problem. So, everybody's got some. He had some, but he had some stuff that was not garden variety, that was a pretty clear biomarker for a brain injury. And so that, brought in the conversation. And sure enough, he'd had a brain injury, but one that he had really just written off. He'd sought care for it once, and again kind of felt like, I don't know, there's nothing there. And there was, from his brain function standpoint, it was one of the strongest biomarkers that I have seen. So a significant brain injury. His reason for coming in was really just feedback from his kind of trusted circle, saying that he seemed to maybe just like be a little bit off, like he's just like half a step off. And he didn't feel that was true of him, but being the high performer he was like, I got to look into this, right? Like I'm getting feedback, I got to look into it. So he came and did this process. So what was part of the fun of working with him, and I thoroughly enjoy my executive folks, my peak performers, because like they want to be perfect, and that like highly motivated, right? And so they're very engaged. And so
Yeah.
he was. So we're doing this, and I'm giving him feedback. He's pulling up his executive, the results of his executive, checkup at Mayo, and he's like, "Guy, I've got all my blood tests right here. Excellent, 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 excellent. My calcium scan on my heart, excellent. Everything. Like I could not be in better shape. But you're telling me I have this, dysregulation in my brain that looks like, impact from a brain injury, that my autonomics are in terrible shape. My HRV is 5. And as we talked about, like, so our system has a scale that just makes it clinically comparable from one person to another. The kind of gold standard in HRV, as you know, is kind of SDNN, and so our equipment just interprets that in a number that makes it easier for us in the software and in training to work with. But his SDNN was down in the low 40s, so that's bad for somebody who's a triathlete. And in our system, it's showing up on our scale as a 5, and that's bad because 3 is congestive heart failure. Right. So you don't look at somebody who's in the shape that he is in. He's obviously, an elite athlete in terms of his conditioning, his diet, his discipline, everything about it. But his autonomics are running right next to somebody who's on the list as congestive heart failure. So this is bad. So, we're having this conversation. He's pointing to all of his Mayo results and that he's in great shape. And I'm saying, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so we have this whole kind of running conversation. He's open to the idea, but he can't get it. Like, how did Mayo not pick this up? How could I have this problem that didn't come through in a blood test or in a scan or something? And part of that for our conversation is because nobody was looking from a bioelectric medicine standpoint at his system, right? They were looking at, an MRI, which is telling you about anatomy, but not function, right? Yeah. So we needed to bring out the function. So in his case, we had kind of one of his main presenting pieces that didn't come in his health history, but just came in actually side conversation. He talked about, one day when I'm wiring him up to do a treatment, he's talking about when he's at the cabin with the guys and they're sitting around, they all tease him that he can just fall asleep at any moment. Like just 30-second lull in the conversation, he falls asleep. I'm like, okay, that's not normal. Like that's even exhausted people don't do that. And sure enough, we saw it demonstrated there in the training that he couldn't stay awake for 30 seconds. He would just nod off. And our trainings are not all that stimulating, right? Because part of them is a test of attention. The arousal system, like can a person stay engaged in an otherwise boring activity? He could not. And so that became the heart of what we trained. So what we did with him is we did transcranial stimulation, so alternating current stimulation. We did transcranial magnetic stimulation, and we did transcranial photobiomodulation, all for the brain injury. And then we did, in terms of biofeedback and training paradigm, operant conditioning, we trained his HRV. And so, it took a lot of time. And I will say, like, again, working in a peak performance setting, I encounter this often, which is what he wanted and what many folks who are at that level of life want is they want performance. They want to be measured as doing well. So he's trying everything he can to hack the system to get a good score, right? So that's what's of interest to him, is like, I want to do well. And so I have to, slowly session by session, talk him out of performance mode and say, what we need is for your actual system to regulate, not for you to figure out how to get the software to tell you you're doing well, because you're manipulating your body to hack the system, right? Like that is not going to help you. So it takes several sessions to get him to submit to the paradigm where he's actually going to have to let his nervous system do the work here. So not his mind, but his nervous system has to figure this out. And he has to sit there frustrated and let it happen, right? So again, my peak performance people do not like that. They're doers. They want to do this and be gone. Like, I got a guy, I know normal people take 40 sessions. Can I be done in 8 sessions? Right? Mm-hmm. And so just to be like, no, no, you can't. You can't do this. Your system is going to have to find its way back. We want to restore the natural intelligence of your autonomic nervous system to regulate your organ system every moment of the day. Not when you're here and you hack the system and then you walk out and your autonomic nervous system didn't learn anything and it goes back to its running the system poorly. We actually need to restore the intelligence in your autonomic nervous system so it does its job every moment of every day for the rest of your life. And so he was cooperative. He submitted, and sure enough, we were able to get him slowly where his HRV was, from 5 to 7 and then 10 and then 15. And he could stay awake for 40 minutes of training without any falling asleep, without having to slap himself in the face, without having to do something. He could just generate the internal arousal, right? His sympathetic nervous system could come online and do what it's supposed to do and regulate the system. And he's gone on to notice that many positive things have changed, right? And is it 100% in the work performance? Not really, but that wasn't really the problem. He was still able to do his job with a little slippage. It was more the resources it was taking for him to do that. And one of the places we had a conversation, when I asked him, is like how do you do, say, with your wife, going for a walk and just having a conversation about life and the kids and all of that? It's like, yeah, that never happens. It's like, I can't do it. I don't have the attention. Right? I'm like, yeah, exactly. And do you have a sense if that's maybe impacting your relationship, how you guys are as a couple, the quality of life that you're having from your relationship, the quality of relationship with your children? Like this is the area where your deficit is really showing up. And partly because you're taking the resources to make work still work. And sure enough, that's what he started to see change, was his ability to actually shift into a rest and digest and restore and regenerate mode when he was offline. So at home, he could take time to play with the kids. He could take time to have a conversation with his wife. He could slow down and be. And like we all know that that's essential, right? We need that for the other side to really go well, like really go well, not just hit performance goals at work, but to show up with a capacity to hold space for challenging moments, to be creative in how we solve problems. All of those kind of soft skills. Those are what go away when our capacity for this other side diminishes. So in his case, that's what we saw happen, was his ability to actually regenerate and restore came back to him.